Let's begin.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone, and welcome to this, what promises to be a very interesting and seminal discussion about the impacts of artificial intelligence on the housing sector throughout the world. It's going to have major impact. I'm Mike Davis. I'm a coordinator for Africa with the International Alliance of Inhabitants. And I'll be taking care of the technical aspects today, including the interpretation. We hope to have coverage in all your languages, but if we don't, please check through the available languages and listen in the next best one. All our interpreters today are volunteers and are members of the Solidarity Interpreters Group of the International Alliance of Inhabitants. They do this work because they want to encourage multilingual global dialogue. So please bear with them. When you are presenting or speaking, please speak slowly, speak clearly, and make sure that they can understand and get your message across to all participants. If you do not have a clear sound, don't be offended if I block you, or I'll put my hands up like this. I'll turn my video on and ask you to stop. This means slow down. You're talking too fast. So, yeah, any issues, you can contact me in the chat and just alert me if there's no interpretation in your channel, and we will do the best we can. Right. Our moderator this afternoon is Cristina Reynolds from Buenos Aires, and she'll be running us through the session this afternoon. All the best. Cristina. Chris?
Hola, Cristina. ¿Qué pasa?
Chris? Desiree?
Ahora
Chris?
sí.
¿Me escuchan? Bien. Buenos días, buenas tardes a todos y todas. Tengo internet un poco inestable, pero vamos a tratar de darle comienzo a esta conferencia, y para ello voy a explicar la metodología que vamos a seguir. Como todos y todas ustedes saben, la Alianza Internacional de Habitantes, durante el mes de su campaña Cero Desalojos, quiere contribuir a sumar a una visión de futuro que tiene que ver con los nuevos conocimientos y cómo influyen en la lucha de todos los habitantes por un hábitat digno. En ese sentido, esta conferencia pretende conceptualizar la inteligencia artificial y su rápida evolución y su impacto en los diferentes ámbitos, profundizar el conocimiento del impacto de la inteligencia artificial en la cuestión de la vivienda y el urbanismo, la gobernanza de los territorios y el control de los conflictos sociales, fomentar el intercambio de experiencias y análisis científicos para el trabajo en red de organizaciones sociales e investigadores con el fin de fundamentar el grupo de trabajo sobre la inteligencia solidaria de los habitantes para hacer frente al impacto de la inteligencia artificial. Para cumplir con estos objetivos, hemos contactado a tres referentes importantes que van a hacer uso de la palabra. En principio vamos a tener una introducción para el tema de nuestro coordinador global, Cesare Ottolini, que va a tratar de concentrarse
Disculpa,
en la
Cristina, un poco más
inteligencia
despacio,
artificial,
un
cómo
poco más
debería
despacio.
fundamentarse en los derechos humanos. Y tenemos luego al relator especial de Naciones Unidas para el derecho a una vivienda adecuada, y a Casey Lynch de la Facultad de Ciencias Sociales de Gestión y del Comportamiento de la Universidad 20 de los Países Bajos. Y por último, a Federico Cugurullo del Departamento de Geografía del Colegio Trinity de Dublín, en Irlanda. Entonces, el desarrollo de la conferencia la tenemos pensada en que podamos escuchar atentamente las ponencias y luego tener al final de cada una un espacio como para formular preguntas. Las preguntas, por supuesto, se podrán hacer utilizando el recurso de la mano levantada en la propia pantalla, o si alguien quisiera dejar un comentario o alguna conclusión o alguna pregunta, también puede utilizar el chat para poder realizarlo. Bien, de esta forma, y si no hay ninguna duda, le pasaría la palabra a Cesare Ottolini para que comience con la introducción de esta temática. Por favor, Cesare.
The audio is off.
Ah, sí, disculpe, sí. Perfecto. Sí, solamente agradecer a Cristina Renas para la coordinación y Mike para la coordinación técnica y los intérpretes. Estamos hablando de inteligencia artificial. Necesita que también los habitantes entiendan que la inteligencia artificial no es sencillamente este juego, este teléfono. Es una cosa que está entrando en nuestra vida y nosotros somos la mercancía, somos la que va a ser extraída a través de los teléfonos. Pero ¿cuáles son las consecuencias? Ya hay varias personas, instituciones que están interesadas, están analizando en distintos sectores. En nuestro sector, el sector de la vivienda, el sector del derecho a la vivienda, el derecho a la ciudad, a la tierra, aparentemente nadie dice nada, solamente algunas cosas con muchas fragmentaciones. Nosotros de la Alianza Internacional de Habitantes siempre vemos las cosas con bastante antelación porque nuestras raíces están en todo el mundo y ven lo que pasa e intentan ayudar favoreciendo la estrategia solidaria de los habitantes. Si no, va a ser imposible. Si no, tenemos un riesgo fuerte de quedar en luchas marginales, luchas que son de puro testimonio. Y sí, sirven para nuestra conciencia, pero no sirven realmente para intentar de hacer frente y posiblemente ganar. Entonces, sin hacer demasiado, como se dice, piropo sobre este tema, entramos en el argumento. La crisis mundial de la vivienda, que ha sido desvelada por la pandemia, hoy afecta gravemente a más de 1.600 millones de personas. ¿Cuál es la causa? Son las políticas neoliberales, rápido desarrollo de la economía de mercado, urbanización y insostenibilidad del mercado de la vivienda, políticas públicas inadecuadas, financiarización del mercado de la vivienda, crisis hipotecaria, megaproyectos urbanísticos, extractivos, las guerras, la ocupación extranjera, discriminación social, racial, de género, de casta. Hay muchos títulos. Ustedes piensan que no tienen nada que ver con la inteligencia artificial. No, es un error pensar que son cosas que van cada uno por su cuento. No, porque la inteligencia artificial es una herramienta se la llaman la cuarta revolución industrial. La revolución que es basada, lo llaman el capitalismo cognitivo. Cuidado, capitalismo cognitivo significa que es alimentado por el colonialismo sobre la inteligencia humana. Esto quiere decir que están extrayendo, no de nuestro cráneo, no es una cosa de películas de fantascientífica, no. Cada vez que nosotros utilizamos estos, ellos extraen datos. Y los datos es la cosa más preciosa en el tema específico, en el tema general. Esto tiene una relación también con grandes confrontaciones. Hay un marco político y geoestratégico. Por favor, no se enoja conmigo si hablo utilizando estas palabras, porque tenemos que aprenderla. Porque, por ejemplo, para decir, si es verdad que aparentemente Estados Unidos están encabezando el imperialismo, tienen toda esta potencia también en el marco de la inteligencia artificial, no es verdad, porque hay otra parte encabezada por China. Ellos también tienen su Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, Xiaomi, que está trabajando. Entonces hay una confrontación muy fuerte sobre la utilización de los datos y también cómo se extraen y también cómo se utilizan en los distintos sectores. En cuanto a lo que va a pasar que las inversiones del capitalismo cognitivo es enorme. Estamos hablando de 200.000 millones de dólares cada año. No, la pregunta es, ¿pueden los gobiernos, pueden la Unión Europea, pueden las Naciones Unidas hoy en día controlar lo que pasa? No, no, no pueden, porque hay ausencia o retraso de políticas reguladoras que son ineficaces, porque el carácter transnacional de la inteligencia artificial escapa intrínsecamente a todo control, porque no tiene una personalidad jurídica. ¿Cómo tú puedes perseguir a alguien que tú no controlas? En el momento en que tú dices, estoy de acuerdo con los cookies. Estoy de acuerdo con los cookies. ¿Qué son los cookies? Ustedes o están de acuerdo que los algoritmos utilizan mis datos. ¿Sabes qué es un algoritmo? Un algoritmo hoy manejado por lo llamo computadoras para estar claro, pero es mucho más. Son millares de páginas de símbolos, de números, de caracteres imposibles para una inteligencia, también para los especialistas controlar. Entonces, ¿qué podemos hacer? Hoy lo que vamos a hacer es ver con esta conferencia, intentar de conocer cuál es el impacto de la inteligencia artificial sobre el tema legislativo, el tema ejecutivo, el tema judicial, el tema del mercado, el tema del derecho a la ciudad. Digo una cosa, usted puede ser, se acuerda que en Europa al menos se hablaba, se decía el aire de las ciudades eh, hace libres, porque ofrecía a los campesinos urbanizados la oportunidad de adquirir derechos como ciudadanos. Pero no es tan cierto que el aire de las ciudades inteligentes, autónomas, haga libres a sus habitantes, residentes e inmigrantes. Porque en el momento cuando estas ciudades van a estar gobernadas aún más, cada vez más por inteligencia artificial, cada vez son más allenas de las instituciones y leyes legitimadas por los sistemas políticos. Entonces, tenemos que conocer, no son cosas que son tan lejas en el tiempo. Vamos a ver en las distintas intervenciones cómo ya estamos en sumergido de hecho en un futuro que está cambiando los paradigmas, que está cambiando también la manera de cómo se desarrolla el tema de la vivienda. El tema de la vivienda no es sencillamente la vivienda con el techo o la ley que permite, no, la vivienda es aún más un producto financiero. Sí, es difícil, estoy de acuerdo, es difícil para los compañeros, compañeras que viven en un pueblo pobre de América Latina pensar que esta cosa tiene que ver con la inteligencia artificial, pero no es tan difícil pensándolo si la tierra donde están asentados, la decisión sobre qué va a estar en este pedazo de tierra va a ser decidida no tan por la municipalidad o por el gobierno, sino por inversores que están a menudo afuera del control o que controlan o que son controlados por los gobernantes. A ver cuáles son las relaciones. Entonces, el objetivo de la conferencia es contribuir a la coproducción de conocimiento en estos sectores, para que podamos concretamente ver cómo construir nuestras herramientas de análisis, intercambio, para fortalecer las reexistencias, es decir, lo que nosotros siempre hemos llamado como la inteligencia solidaria de los habitantes, porque si no va a ser imposible enfrentar los desafíos de la inteligencia artificial. Porque, para decir una cosa, campaña cero desalojos. Ustedes saben, puede ser que no todos conocen, pero la campaña cero desalojos empezó en el año 2004 al Foro Social Mundial de Mumbai. En aquel tiempo, casi nadie se daba cuenta de la fuerza, de la gravedad de la amenaza de los desalojos. Pero la posibilidad que hemos tenido en aquel tiempo de intercambiar en el marco del Foro Social el tema de los desalojos nos ha permitido de construir, lanzar una campaña mundial cero desalojo que ahora en estos últimos años se ha desarrollado como merece, pero porque tenía estas raíces, estos conocimientos científicos y la solidaridad que nos ha unido, que nos ha fortalecido, nos ha permitido de utilizar todo este conocimiento para hacer frente a los desalojos con herramientas adecuadas. En algún caso hemos ganado, en muchos no hemos ganado, pero para decir, en el momento en el cual hemos visto, hemos analizado, hemos decidido que para ganar la batalla contra la COVID necesitaba también ganar la batalla contra los desalojos, esta cosa ha producido, este conocimiento, este intercambio, ha producido una campaña que ha logrado parar desalojos con moratorias en muchos países del mundo. Ahora estamos viendo una cosa que es mucho más grande, es decir, la erupción de la inteligencia artificial en el tema de la vivienda de la ciudad. Probablemente tenemos retraso, pero no tenemos que perder ¿cómo decir? La esperanza y la gana de cambiar el rumbo, o por lo menos de parar, por lo menos de lograr algunas pequeñas victorias. Esto es importante decirlo. Hago algún ejemplo solamente pincelados. El tema temas que va a ser desarrollado luego para los demás. El tema, por ejemplo, del derecho a la vivienda. Hay pactos internacionales, tratados, a menudo en las constituciones de una parte. ¿Ustedes piensan que los jueces sigan evaluando y juzgando el derecho a la vivienda de una persona o de una comunidad así, sin utilizar la inteligencia artificial? Es un error. Ya lo están haciendo. ¿Y usted piensa que utilizando la inteligencia artificial eh, es una utilización progresiva? No, no, porque la inteligencia artificial lo que va a hacer, se llama justicia predictiva o justicia automática, la van a utilizar utilizando el, ¿cómo decir? Lo que la mayoría de los juicios ha sido hecho. O sea, si la gran parte de los juicios ha sido en contra del derecho a la vivienda, la digo en síntesis, no va a estar que un juez dice, no, yo me opongo a lo que dice la inteligencia artificial. La va a aplicar y punto, y punto. Tenemos que estar listos frente a estos jueces, a este tipo de justicia, así como tenemos que estar listos frente a otro tipo de impacto. Una pregunta. ¿Ustedes piensan que toda esta plataforma, Airbnb, Booking.com, etcétera, y aún más la utilización de plataforma online para buscar una vivienda en alquiler o en compra sea tan justa? No, olvídense, porque hay, y lo van a explicar luego los relatores, se llaman algoritmos que están hechos expresamente para inflar los precios e empujar la financiarización. O sea, si en el mercado normal, para decir una cosa, un departamento normal podría costar, no, el pedido y la oferta del departamento es 500 euros mensuales, piensa que la misma cosa va a ser aplicada en una plataforma. No, porque hay mecanismos, se llaman algoritmos concurrenciales, concurrentes, que automáticamente inflan los precios. Entonces, al final, lo que va a buscar, que va a buscar, no encuentra el precio de 500 euros, va a encontrar un precio que es 600 euros, 1000 euros. No porque hay gente que propone de pagar esto, sino porque hay algoritmos que se han autoalimentados. Y la cosa, cuidados, no es solamente para los Airbnb, para los alquiler turísticos, sino también para el mercado, aún más y aún más. eh, Vamos a ver. Última cosa. Usted piensa que, como la llaman las smart cities, qué palabra, las ciudades inteligentes, donde las cosas son todas automáticas, funcionan a la perfección, eh, sea la solución. Eh, no lo creo. Vamos a ver una intervención, la intervención final sobre este tema, cómo están ya construyendo ciudades automáticas, donde hay seguramente muchos vantajes, o sea, cosas, servicios que funcionan, pero primero son construidas, eh, voy a decir, limpiando el piso, es decir, desalojando las comunidades. Segundo, van a construir con reglas que no son las reglas democráticas de aquel país o de aquella comunidad. No, son reglas que son eh, construidas alrededor e en función de la financiarización, es decir, de la ganancia. Las ciudades que van construyendo, las ciudades inteligentes, las ciudades automáticas, no va a ser construida a raíz del derecho a la ciudad. Hoy, 31 de octubre, es el Día Mundial del Derecho a la Ciudad. Piensan que, las ciudades que van a construir, lo que tienen el poder, el dinero, va a ser construida a raíz de los derechos humanos. No, va a ser construida a raíz del derecho de la financiarización de la ganancia. Bueno, ya he dicho bastante. Dejo la palabra al próximo, pero si ustedes ya tienen alguna pregunta sobre esta primera intervención, estoy a disposición para eventuales aclaraciones. Gracias.
Gracias, César, por respetar el tiempo. No veo mano por el momento. ¿Están escuchando?
Cristina, no te oigo. ¿Sí?
¿Escuchan?
¿Quién? Sí, si hay pregunta, si hay pregunta.
Pero no me están escuchando.
No te oigo.
No sé qué pasa.
Intenta acercar.
¿Me escuchan ahora?
Un poco, ¿sí?
Bueno, creo que estamos un poco impactados por la temática. Eh, si les parece bien, podemos avanzar con la próxima presentación y a lo mejor nos vamos poniendo a tono para realizar las preguntas. Creo que ya está porque lo he visto el relator especial de Naciones Unidas sobre el derecho a una vivienda adecuada, Balakrishnan Rajagopal, y le pediríamos a él si pudiera intervenir sobre el impacto de la inteligencia artificial en el mercado inmobiliario y cómo están, qué apreciaciones tienen desde el lugar que ocupa con esta cuestión de la inteligencia artificial. Le damos la palabra, relator.
Thank you very much. Dear participants, friends, it's my great pleasure to meet with you virtually in my capacity as the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to adequate housing. Many thanks for inviting me. I would like to draw your attention to two recent reports on discrimination and spatial segregation that I submitted to the UN General Assembly and the Human Rights Council with regard to housing that have a direct relevance to the challenges we now face with the use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, large language models, and big data to make decisions which may adversely affect the right to adequate housing. The concerns that I have are many, so let me quickly go through them. One of the major areas of concern is the link between financialization of housing in general and the move to digital platforms and big data. There is a structural link between big finance and big data, as can be evidenced by the emergence of companies such as Blackstone. Blackstone, one of the major private equity finance-backed groups through the ownership of entities such as Invitation Homes, emerged as a major, if not the principal owner of low-income rental housing in the United States, while muscling its way into single-family housing ownership and rentals as well. The owner of that group, Schwarzman, is the main benefactor of major efforts in mainstreaming artificial intelligence, as seen in the new MIT School on Artificial Intelligence established in his name. The link between big finance, big tech, and data is at the heart of this commodified frontier of housing, which does not treat housing as a human right. This may be less of an issue if big data analytics did not raise concerns about discrimination and racist bias in housing-related fields, such as client rental screening, credit rating, and mortgage application, pricing software for property transactions, etc. But it does. This discrimination can be both direct or indirect. Many financial institutions, for example, use proxies for algorithmic discrimination, such as zip codes or postcodes, redlining racially associated neighborhoods. Data is often also collected and used by racially and economically privileged people, leaving out people of color. Algorithms which underlie and guide big data and digital platforms can perpetuate or even amplify racialized data, despite some hope that machine-made decisions could and should be free from human bias. A racist past and present can be frozen in data used to make decisions about credit application. Both the process and the data input can be infected by a racist bias. Algorithms can sometimes hide a racist bias by using proxies for data discrimination, making it hard to prove it in litigation. Even when no preferences are expressed by an advertiser about race, sometimes the algorithms and machine learning will have such entrenched differences that they can racially target individuals of color. Other algorithms do not consider variables of race. For example, there is something called the Loan Product Advisor used by the company Freddie Mac. Yet there is no such thing as a colorblind credit score analysis, since retrieved data is often based, the retrieved data that it is based on is often biased. While some argue that race neutrality in data does not work, the use of race-conscious data to correct algorithmic racist bias is still very delicate to implement, especially in big data operations, where massive amounts of information are handled. This is particularly challenging in addressing spatial segregation. Yet, one can make the case that development of big data is urgently needed to correct the racist flaws of existing algorithms in the current credit system. Some algorithms are more than 15 years old and developed with data dating back to the 1990s. These processes are detrimental to people of color due to historical bias. Another major area of concern I have has to do with tenant screening software in general in a housing market where rentals are a major and increasing share of housing, for example, in many European countries, and where major private equity finance companies are muscling their way into ownership of rental housing. Nearly all landlords now use some sort of tenant screening software as a way to find who they consider to be the highest quality tenants. Given the cheap availability of electronic civil and criminal court records, sex offender registries, terrorism watch lists, and housing court records, the barrier to entry is low. Virtually any team with modern technology and basic coding skills could control the housing destiny for countless prospective tenants. Individual companies play by their own rules using internally driven proprietary rules to conduct the background checks and provide a recommendation. Given how error-prone tenant screening reports are, a sizable number of renters face technology-driven housing precarity each year. This status quo disproportionately impacts vulnerable populations. Because Latinos and African Americans in the US are arrested, convicted, and incarcerated at higher rates than whites, members of those groups suffer an unlawful, disparate impact if tenant screening software disqualifies them as prospective tenants based on their criminal history. People impacted by the criminal justice system continue to be screened out of housing. Criminal legal databases include information not just about conviction or sentencing, but also about arrests. Certain tenant screening companies may not distinguish arrests from criminal convictions or convictions from 20 years ago from more recent ones. But arrests are merely a suspicion of criminal activity, not a proof of misconduct. There are many other concerns that I have as well that arise from the use of big data and digital platforms that I will simply flag as issues to be monitored. Increasing digitalization in the tracking and detection systems that many countries have may infringe the right to privacy and disproportionately affect minorities. The Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights has warned of a digital welfare dystopia in which unfettered data matching is used to expose, survey, and punish welfare beneficiaries, and conditions are imposed on beneficiaries that undermine individual autonomy and choice. In the Netherlands, for example, the system in question, now struck down by a Dutch court, provided central and local authorities with broad powers to share and analyze data, including information on employment, housing, education, benefits, and health insurance, as well as other forms of identifiable data. The tool targeted low-income and minority neighborhoods, leading to de facto discrimination based on socioeconomic grounds. Social media's targeted advertising is another major area of concern. Studies in the United States have shown how Facebook is used to allow advertisers to narrow their audience, thus excluding Facebook users with certain ethnic affinities under the demographics category of its ad targeting tool. This targeted advertising could be used to prevent Black people or brown people from viewing specific housing advertisements, which is prohibited under many countries' anti-discrimination laws. Facebook controls an estimated 22% of the market share for digital advertising in the United States. And its targeted advertising, which is the core of the company's business model, has been shown to be racially exclusionary. These practices are best understood as a form of digital redlining, which is defined as the creation and maintenance of technology practices that further entrench discriminatory practices against already marginalized groups. Facebook uses targeted advertising in the employment context as well, raising similar concerns. Security databases are my next area of concern. The UK and Northern Ireland, for example, uses a database known as the Gangs Violence Matrix that has been demonstrated to be discriminatory. The result is that 78% of individuals on the matrix are Black, and an additional 9% are from other ethnic minority groups, while the police's own figures show that only 27% of those responsible for serious youth violence are Black. Police officers reportedly make assumptions about individuals based on their race, gender, age, and socioeconomic status, which further reinforce harmful stereotypes. The police also share the matrix with other agencies, such as job centers and housing associations. Depending on the nature of the way this information is shared, this poses an opportunity for possible violations of many rights, including housing. The expansive use of biometrics, which is the automated recognition of individuals based on their biological and behavioral characteristics, as well as facial recognition, or other concerns that I have when they become part of artificial intelligence, which are known as large language models that actually use deep learning and large data sets to understand and generate new content. Biometrics can include fingerprint data, retinal scans, and facial recognition, as well as the recognition of a person's vein and blood vessel patterns, ear shape, and gait. Biometrics are extensively used in welfare provisioning. India has the world's largest biometric ID system called Aadhaar, for example, which, among other things, is used for welfare provisioning, in addition to being a requirement for opening bank accounts and a number of other daily activities. Biometrics are also used extensively by UN aid agencies and other international organizations. Facial recognition raises similar concerns. Landlords in many countries have sought to install facial recognition entry systems for tenants to enter buildings. Landlords may also fail to obtain affirmative consent and fail to ensure that facial recognition systems perform accurately, including for women, children, elderly people, and people of color. Such tech can also be used by the landlords to harass and monitor tenants. In most cases, there are no laws governing this data use. So there are also risks that the facial data collected could be shared with the government or the police. The differential treatment in the case of biometrics and facial recognition frequently perpetuates negative stereotypes and may even entail prohibited discrimination that affect access to public space, for example. Finally, member states and multiple organs of the UN are increasingly relying on big data analytics to inform their policies. For example, the International Organization for Migration's displacement tracking matrix monitors populations on the move to better predict the needs of displaced people in using mobile phone records and geotagging, as well as analysis of social media activity. If the data used to inform machine learning algorithms at borders are used in political campaigns or legislation or flawed, in an environment of structural bias against minorities, such misrepresentation of data can fuel disinformation, hate speech, and violence. Dear participants, let me just conclude by calling attention to a resolution of the UN Human Rights Council adopted after the presentation of my 2 reports on discrimination and spatial segregation that have significant relevance for the regulation of artificial intelligence that can protect and advance the right to adequate housing. As you know, in the United States and Europe and many other countries, regulation of artificial intelligence, especially after the recent focus of attention around ChatGPT, has made this issue extremely important. This resolution of the Human Rights Council calls for prohibiting all forms of discrimination. It calls for ensuring that housing and anti-discrimination legislation provides sufficiently dissuasive sanctions for housing discrimination. It calls for regular monitoring and identifying systemic discrimination in relation to housing, including spatial segregation. And finally, it calls for establishing accessible and sufficiently resourced non-judicial mechanisms to ensure remedies. Overall, I believe that this resolution is a very important statement that can contribute to the regulation of artificial intelligence, which is an urgent task before many states. I look forward to learning more about the issues raised in this event by many of you and explore potential areas for collaboration in the future. I hope that you will see if there are any areas where you think that my voice could be of assistance to amplify your important work. Thank you very much.
Relator por el derecho a la vivienda de Naciones Unidas. Quisiera saber si hay alguna pregunta o algún comentario.
Cristina, no se escucha muy bien.
Para aprovechar su presencia. Quieren poner su mano, levantar
Não estamos ouvindo, Cristina. Eu não estou.
Parece que todavía seguimos impactados por la temática.
Cristina, tu micrófono no funciona.
Automáticamente.
De toda manera, Cristina, de todas maneras quisiera hacer alguna pregunta y propuesta para el relator.
¿Y qué causas y consecuencias puede tener? César, ¿querés hacer alguna
Sí.
pregunta?
Sí, gracias. Primero, agradecer al relator, a Rajagopal, con el cual estamos colaborando desde años, en particular durante el periodo de pandemia. Hemos logrado victorias al final, la moratoria mundial. Creo que ha sido muy importante. Ahora, probablemente el tema es más grave, es peor que una bomba atómica, lo que estamos viviendo, el tema de la inteligencia artificial. Entonces, muy bueno la intervención y las informaciones sobre el llamado de Naciones Unidas para la regulación del mercado. Sin embargo, lo que vemos que es casi imposible, que solamente llamados funcionan. Otra cosa, de todas maneras vamos a seguir. Otra cosa, ustedes están diciendo una gran parte de la inteligencia artificial va a afectar el tema de la discriminación, el tema de los derechos humanos. Hay una parte, yo creo, igualmente importante, es el tema de la justicia automática. Es decir, los jueces, lo que estamos viendo en distintos países, aún más están utilizando aplicaciones app o en el sistema mismo nacional para hacer juicios automáticos. Hago un ejemplo. En Italia hay un montón de amparos para aliviar un poco el trabajo. Dicen, tú haces que hacer automáticamente los juicios. Casos de derecho a la vivienda, te hago un ejemplo. Nosotros no tenemos el derecho constitucional a la vivienda. Por lo tanto, pueden desalojar sin habitación alternativa adecuada. Estamos aplicando para que la Suprema Corte diga que hay un conflicto entre la ratifica del tratado por parte de Italia, el Pacto Internacional sobre los Derechos Económicos, etc., y la ley que dice que se puede desalojar sin habitación alternativa adecuada. Lo que va a pasar es que los jueces están diciendo no, dicen que no es, no elevan como un conflicto entre la ley suprema y la ley de desalojos, para decir, entonces está parado todos. Esta cosa va a ser aún más automáticamente puesta en marcha, porque la justicia automática utiliza todos los datos, la mayoría. Si el 80% o el 90% de los amparos han sido en contra, claramente un juez dice, no, yo no voy a sublevar la excepción de constitucionalidad. Te he hecho un ejemplo concreto. Y lo que está pasando, lo que están diciendo, lo que van a reformar la justicia, un abogado que quisiera challenge el juicio del jueces, va a tener que demostrar la capacidad de contestar técnicamente el algoritmo. ¿Cuál es el abogado que hoy en día es capaz de contestar el algoritmo según el cual el juez ha dicho que no? Porque la mayoría de los juicios son que no. Esto es otra cosa, un tema que sería bueno profundizar. Final y cerro rápidamente. Estamos seguramente de acuerdo para colaborar. Al final de esta conferencia vamos a proponer la constitución, la creación de un grupo de trabajo sobre inteligencia artificial y derecho a la vivienda. Sería bueno si podemos intercambiar y hacer parte de este grupo. Gracias, Raja Gopal. Gracias, relator.
Thank you, Mr. Ottolini. A pleasure always to be here and to collaborate. I think you mentioned very important points. The use of, as you call, automatic justice, reliance on data-driven decision-making in the judiciary is actually a troubling development, not just in the area of housing, in a variety of different areas of criminal justice that could open the door for very bad outcomes for people who are already facing discriminatory treatment from the justice system, such as racial and ethnic minorities, women, people who are economically at the bottom of the hierarchy and so on. The reforms that many countries are actually trying to pursue regarding artificial intelligence are at the moment a bit overly focused on what I would call as the doomsday scenarios. Meaning, for example, there is a regulatory change that the Biden administration is pursuing in the United States. And the big areas of focus seem to be the use of artificial intelligence that can have national security implications, particularly for the defense industry and for generation of technology that can lead to automated decision making, with regard to use of weaponry. Of course, that's actually a major area of concern down the line. But even before we get to that science fiction future, we have ongoing everyday use of data, big data, including as part of existing artificial intelligence model. Artificial intelligence is not a future. It's already here. It is already being used in a number of different ways. As I mentioned, for example, with regard to biometrics and facial recognition technologies, this has been going on for a decade or 2 decades, in many countries, quite systematically. So the difference is that the capacity for machine learning has improved a lot by quantum leaps, and the technological ability to process a large amount of data and to generate, particular conclusions is actually vastly improved. And I do think that it's very, very important for any country that is trying to regulate artificial intelligence to not only pay attention to future potentially catastrophic consequences of artificial general intelligence, impact on security systems and defense and weaponry, but also look at the impact on everyday lives of people, including in the area of housing. Discrimination and spatial segregation remain extremely important as frameworks. And I think that it behooves not just the regulatory authorities pursuing reform, but also groups such as yours and others who are working to address structural challenges to discrimination and in the area of housing to push for specific reforms in that area. For example, in the justice system, if there is actually a sense that over 90% of the amparo cases, for example, lead to adverse outcomes against tenants, for example, that should go the specifically targeted remedial approach to that. For example, ensuring that if artificial intelligence is sought to be used in a case, then there must be adequate, representational capacity, or solely relying on data in order to come to a decision should be actually against the law. There must be some sort of balancing when it comes to decisions that are made on such automated forms of technology alone. So we have seen that in the case of complaints about large-scale discrimination using facial recognition, for example, that there are various protective mechanisms that are being put in place, including internal due diligence that have to be done before the use of facial recognition in decision making. Perhaps we can actually look at some of those examples and see if they're applicable in the area of housing.
Si no hay otro comentario u otra pregunta. disculpen, me dicen que me están escuchando mal. Creo que se debe a que está funcionando mal.
Más fuerte, disculpa, intenta acercar tu micrófono, por favor.
Internet.
Tina, disculpe,
Perdón.
we can't hear you.
Okay. ¿Me escuchan ahora? ¿Me escuchan?
Muy lejos,
Eu estou.
sin audífonos, intenta sin audífonos. Mejor creo.
The mic. Unplug it.
Unplugged, sí. No.
Unplug from the computer. Unplug your headphones.
Aprovecho para preguntar al relator, entre tanto que soluciona. ¿Ustedes piensan que este próximo año ustedes podrían trabajar un informe específico sobre el tema de derecho a la vivienda y inteligencia artificial? Sería interesante ver, como ya ha hecho sobre financiarización, etcétera, hacer un informe específico, entonces lanzar un llamado a nivel mundial para tener contribuciones.
Yes, of course, I'm very open to that. At the moment, though, as you know, I issued a call for inputs into my next report, which is actually going to be on resettlement as a human rights issue. So my next report to the Human Rights Council in March is going to be on why, despite the fact that so many people are evicted or they lose their homes for a variety of reasons, from development projects to climate change, conflict disasters, to climate disasters, to people who are fleeing conflict, so few are seen to be entitled to be resettled in a proper way that ensures their right to adequate housing. So I'm going to focus on that in the report in March, and also in the next year I will hold regional consultations and issue another report on resettlement to the General Assembly, and then finally in March of 2025 I will submit a set of internationally binding guiding principles to the UN Human Rights Council to be adopted, that will hopefully advance the legal remedies going forward. But I do have at least a year left after that in my mandate. So I have 2 other reports to write. So I would certainly be very open to that. And I think it's a great idea to look at artificial intelligence and technology platforms. As far as I know, the Special Rapporteur on Racism has in the past issued a report on the use of technology as a barrier or as an obstacle to the realization of the measures to eliminate discrimination against racial minorities. And many years ago, the Special Rapporteur on extreme poverty looked at, as I said, digital dystopias, the use of digitalized mechanisms for welfare provisioning, for example. But there has not been any sort of look systematically at artificial intelligence in the housing context. So I'm very open to that.
Perfecto. Entonces, sí.
Vieni. Buonasera. Un attimo solo, mando questo messaggio al mio collega e poi torno da te. Buonasera Adriano. Allora abbiamo parere negativo per Opi per quanto riguarda GFG Partners, perché sembrerebbe che nel settembre scorso abbiano chiesto una rinegoziazione alla stessa Open perché non riuscivano a pagare le rate. Quindi questa strada ci è preclusa, ma
Cesare, acho
facciamo
que
parte della
Cristina está com
federazione perché
problema.
la faccio mettere
Eu gostaria
come,
de falar algo.
come rinunciata. Quindi dobbiamo trovare sicuramente un'altra strada. Ci sta anche il canale di Idexa, vediamo un attimo se riusciamo a caricarlo lì, fammi sapere che ne pensi.
Me ouvindo, Cesare?
Sì,
Guarda lì.
Cristina?
Si sente male, qui dentro si sente male. Vai un attimo. Vuoi che ti do la wifi? No? Ok.
Cristina está com problema com o áudio, Cesare.
Qualcuno che no.
Momento. The microphone, it's not good. Sorry, I had to mute Luca. The microphone is not good enough. We cannot hear and the interpreters cannot interpret. Please, can you check your sound? Some technical problems today. Sorry for this. It's life in the digital universe. Bacteria, would you like to go ahead?
Sim,
Start your video.
não estou com meu vídeo permitindo abrir, mas eu vou estar
Okay.
aqui
Please go ahead.
colocando algumas questões. Sim, estou falando. Uma boa tarde, bom dia a todos e todas, boa noite. E dizer da importância dessa conferência. Fiquei muito feliz de ouvir o relator. Muito interessante esse relatório dos direitos humanos. Gostaríamos de ter esse relatório para conhecer melhor o conteúdo que foi relatado, inclusive sobre essa questão da inteligência artificial. Nos preocupa muito, porque para nós que discutimos direito à cidade, que estamos nas nossas comunidades, é muito importante, né, o processo do olhar, do olho no olho, e nós sabemos que essa inteligência artificial, há vários momentos já nos disseram cidade inteligente, é importante, e a gente fica sempre preocupada que tipo de cidade inteligente é essa, que não atende às demandas, e aí essa inteligência artificial, que aí nos preocupa muito mais, porque nós não sabemos com quem estamos conversando atrás dessa telinha, dessa inteligência artificial. Porque uma foto nossa, põe a sua foto, não sabemos quem está lá atrás, quem é que está analisando a nossa foto, quem está analisando a nossa situação. Então, isso é muito preocupante mesmo, mas nós temos que enfrentar esse debate, de ver com forma toda a inteligência nossa também, dos estudiosos, como o próprio relator, o próprio Cesare e outros que vão estar também nesse debate, para ir ajudando nesse processo de a gente entender melhor e enfrentar esses problemas para que as nossas cidades e as nossas lutas não sejam artificiais, mas que elas possam ser concretas e dar sustentação concreta e não artificial, né? E eu acho que fazer uma regulamentação das plataformas é muito importante. Aqui no Brasil, nós enfrentamos muito o processo da fake news, inclusive em vários outros países, mas aqui estamos num processo de regulamentação de plataforma sobre essa questão de fake news, que eu acho que não é fácil enfrentar uma regulamentação, não é fácil enfrentar essas plataformas, porque são poderosas e temos muita dificuldade também para que o próprio Congresso, as próprias instituições governamentais possam entender que esse processo é importante. E eu acho que para a questão da moradia, para a questão das nossas lutas de políticas sociais, seria importante a gente entender melhor e ver de que forma a gente pode estar enfrentando para essa regulamentação. Eu acho que esses estudos nos permitem ajudar nessa incidência. Então, por isso que eu achei muito importante, muito interessante a fala do relator. Obrigada.
Veo que Cristina ha regresado. Intenta, Cristina. No, oímos niente. Si no, sigo intentando coordinar.
¿Me escuchan?
No,
Hey,
¿Me escuchan ahora?
sí. Sí, 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 sí,
Sí.
sí, sí.
Bueno, eh, entonces, muchas gracias por este intercambio que de alguna manera nos va iluminando en este tema que es absolutamente novedoso para todos y todas nosotras. De modo que pudiéramos ir avanzando un poco más. Y si Mike o Cesare tienen la presentación de Casey Lynch, que como no puede estar presente, mandó una presentación filmada. Pertenece a la Facultad de Ciencias Sociales, de Gestión y del Comportamiento de la Universidad de Twente en los Países Bajos. Entonces, vamos a escuchar la presentación y luego realizamos un nuevo intercambio. Adelante, Cesare.
Mike, we can't heard. No, no, no. Mike, please. We can't heard. No.
okay, I don't know what's happening there. One second.
Yes, yes, please. Nothing. Mike, nothing.
Sorry, I've got limited bandwidth here. Cesare,
Maybe
can you
I try me.
you share from your computer?
Okay, but I need to be the host, hopefully.
You should be able to do it now. Desiree, you have host powers.
Yes, okay. A moment, I have to download the.
Give me back the hosting.
A moment.
Good afternoon. My name is Casey Lynch.
Your screen.
Where I have to share.
At the bottom at the toolbar, the green button that says share screen. Alt
Okay.
S.
Yeah. This and this.
I'm an assistant professor of digitalization and society at the University of Twente in the Netherlands. Today I'll talk about AI's impact on housing. First, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me. I wish I could. My name is Casey Lynch. I'm an assistant professor of digitalization and society at the University of Twente and about AI's impact on housing. First, I want to thank the organizers for me. I wish I could be there live with you all today, but I'm so happy to contribute this recording. And if anyone wishes to discuss further, please get in contact with me and I'd be happy to chat. So, but I have a brief introduction. I will go over 4 primary ways that AI is being integrated into housing markets in my presentation today. But I will start by saying that it's hard to draw sort of grand conclusions about the impact of AI on housing markets, both given that those impacts are perhaps still emerging and that housing markets are quite diverse across geographic contexts. And I do think that there's, to this point, rather a lack of critical research that is needed in this area. So what I'll talk about today is more sort of pointing towards some areas that might be investigated further. But what I will say, some sort of broad takeaways that I might offer would be that AI applications in real estate are built on and encode existing logics that drive housing markets. So in housing markets, where financialization, speculation are driving forces in the market, AI applications are basically just encoding that and streamlining that process. Because of that, what we might see in terms of the impacts or the effects of AI in housing markets are likely just to be the exacerbation of existing and extension of existing abusive practices, forms of extraction, exclusion, and so on. In this process as well, I think one thing to keep our eye on is that these practices, the sort of use of AI in these areas, are often being used to streamline processes really across the housing market, which allows certain large players, corporate landlords, and other forms of financial interests to concentrate control and thus exercise greater influence over market dynamics, prices, and so on. And that because of this as well, it also sometimes makes these processes harder to detect who's responsible or how to locate responsibility can be more difficult in some instances and thus more difficult to contest perhaps. So I'll focus on 4 different applications of AI in the housing market. Today, I'll focus a bit more on the first 2 here, as those are the ones that I've researched more extensively, and the second 2 I will touch on briefly at the end. But perhaps the most well-known widespread application of AI in the housing market is the use of AI to estimate the value of individual homes. This can be both to estimate the sales, potential sales price of individual homes, as well as potential rental prices of individual homes. And obviously operates in different ways across different countries, but at least in the US, the largest player in this field is Zillow. There's also Redfin, Trulia, and a number of other real estate platforms that offer similar estimates based on AI models. So Zillow describes their Zestimate as in the following way, right? They use state-of-the-art statistical and machine learning models that can examine hundreds of data points for each individual home. To calculate a Zestimate, Zillow uses a sophisticated neural network-based model that incorporates data from county and tax assessor records and direct feeds from hundreds of multiple listing services and brokerages. Zestimate also incorporates home characteristics, including square footage, location, or the number of bathrooms, on-market data such as listing price, description, comparable homes in the area, and days on the market, off-market data, including tax assessments, prior sales, and other publicly available records, as well as broader market trends, including seasonal changes in demand. So these estimates are produced for, in this case from Zillow, 104 million homes across the United States. Redfin offers 90-something million estimates, Trulia another 60 million or so. And so houses, across the country have these estimates. And what we can see is that these companies are continually improving these algorithms in various ways, both by incorporating new data about individual houses, about certain housing markets, about market dynamics, and about areas, specific areas and neighborhoods in individual cities, especially those with sort of very active housing markets. And so they're incorporating all this new data, and they're also then comparing there's estimates to eventual sales prices on actual properties to then try to improve the accuracy, as they would say, of these estimates. And so these estimates are available in the United States, at least publicly published, right? Publicly available on these platforms like Zillow, Redfin, and Trulia. I know in other countries they're perhaps not publicly available, but used more on the back end for making financial decisions from large actors, which I'll get to in a second. But in the US, these are publicly available even for houses that are not currently on the market or even potentially on the market, as we can see here in the case of the White House. But what this does, and I think is an often undiscussed but very important aspect of the housing market in the US, is that this is often the main information that both buyers, sellers, renters, and individual landlords might have about the current state of the market and the potential value of an individual property. So there is increasingly some research coming out at this point, really working papers, in progress right now that are really showing that these estimates are not just representing or estimating values of properties, but they are setting the values of properties. So both buyers, sellers, renters, and tenants, renters and landlords look to this information when they're trying to come to an agreement. And so they are setting the value, basically. And so what we can see in a number of these studies that are emerging right now is that prices tend to be converging on this estimate rather than, say, this estimate being this representation, sort of objective representation of the market. So this, of course, is something that we should be quite aware of and critical of, right? That basically one company and their algorithm is somewhat single-handedly shaping expectations and prices in the US housing market. These same systems for estimating the values of individual homes have then been integrated into what's now known as the iBuyer industry. So for those who are unfamiliar with this, these are companies that basically use AI to buy and sell homes for a profit. So to sell a home to one of these iBuyer companies, you can just enter an address, your address into the platform. You can often immediately get after answering some questions, almost immediately get an actual cash offer on your home. Often there's very little to no human involvement in this process. At most, there's a video tour walkthrough of an individual home. Other times you might submit photos to get you a final offer on the home. And with just some few clicks of the button, you can sell your home to one of these companies. And then the company turns around, might make some minor cosmetic improvements on the home, some paints, some new countertops, and then resell it at a premium, of course. In the process, the companies also extract a 5% transaction fee.
Sorry, we've lost the screen. Yeah, I don't know. I've lost the screen share.
Se perdió el compartir pantalla.
Can you share your screen?
No, Mike, because you become the...
Sorry, might have been my fault.
Yes, please, I need to be the host.
Yeah, you are the host.
Yes, I need to be. Without, I can't.
Yeah, you're the host now.
Okay, thanks. A moment.
Sorry.
A moment there.
Immediately get after answering some questions.
A moment, Zoom. Okay, there and there.
Immediately get an actual cash offer on your home. Often there's very little to no human involvement in this process. At most, there's a video tour walkthrough of an individual home. Other times you might submit photos to get you a final offer on the home. And with just some few clicks of the button, you can sell your home to one of these companies. And then the company turns around, might make some minor cosmetic improvements on the home, some paints, some new countertops, and then resell it at a premium, of course. In the process, the companies also extract a 5% transaction fee. They're able to do this basically because they cut out traditional real estate agents and other kinds of intermediaries. And so they're able to take some of those transaction fees for themselves. So
Now the sound is gone, Cesare. But you're muted.
Sorry, Mike, what's the problem?
We can't hear the sound.
The sound is the...
Sí, pero se interrumpió.
Ahora interrumpió, ahora sí, ahora interrumpió. Intento otra vez. Adelante.
You're able to sort of sell and buy on your own terms directly from the company. Of course, by doing this, some of these companies are specifically focusing on specific markets and buying and selling a significant number of homes in certain markets. These companies become major players, sometimes in specific neighborhoods, right, where they might own 20 to 30 to 40% of the properties that are on an individual market, and thus able to set prices quite considerably. This doesn't always work. So a lot of these iBuyer programs expanded quite significantly in 2020 and 2021. But as the market began to cool later in 2021, we saw a lot of these companies begin to fail or to pull out of the market. So Zillow pulled out of the market. Redfin, I believe, also pulled out of the market. Basically after buying too many homes for too high of a price, and then often having to sell homes for significantly less than they bought them for. We can see the same thing happened. Opendoor still exists. Opendoor posted a $1.4 billion loss in 2022, but continues to exist, continues to buy and sell homes in the US. So while there's been some failures in this area, these are still big actors, and there is still a business model that is being pursued. And as AI improves, as they sort of work out some more of the logistics, perhaps, of how to include both AI with human controls, I think we have not seen the end of iBuyers in housing markets yet. Another form of real estate investing and sort of financialization of real estate where AI is active is in real estate investment trusts. Of course, these have been around for a while, especially in the years since the 2008 financial crisis. But basically, right, I imagine people are familiar with these, but these are mutual funds that allow individuals to invest in real estate, both residential and commercial or otherwise. Invest in real estate without having to actually deal with any of the risks or any of the responsibility of managing an asset. So pools a bunch of money, buys a bunch of properties, and then the company manages the assets and gives the dividends back to the investors. And we can see there's not a ton of information right now about the use of AI in REITs, but from looking through current conversations happening in that sphere, you can see there's a lot of interest in incorporating AI to make REITs more efficient, to extract more value, to allow them to expand right into new areas. So this is just from a blog post from someone working in this area, posted a few weeks ago, I believe, saying, right, AI can be used to analyze vast amounts of real estate data, such as property valuations, rental income, occupancy rates, and market trends. By leveraging machine learning algorithms, REITs can gain valuable insights into property performance, identify investment opportunities, and optimize their portfolio allocation strategies. Additionally, AI can help automate various aspects of property management, such as lease administration, rent collection, and maintenance scheduling. This automation can lead to cost savings, improved operational efficiency, and enhanced tenant experiences. So then we're probably familiar with these kinds of corporate landlords and financial instruments already, and this is just kind of laying out the way that AI can perhaps allow them to operate on new levels and in new ways. So definitely something I think to be aware of. And finally, I would be sort of remiss if I didn't mention the various ways that AI is being used to kind of determine access to housing, both in the rental market and in the buying market. So AI systems are increasingly used to screen potential tenants for risks. And a number of recent studies have come out and good reporting, for instance, here in Jacobin, on the ways that this is driving further discrimination, exacerbating existing forms of discrimination in housing markets. These systems are often based on biased, incomplete, or inaccurate data. And even if they were based on, say, accurate data, they're still being used basically to deny people housing. In the case of mortgages, we can see just in the past few years in the US context that Rocket Mortgage, which is an internet-based AI-driven mortgage broker, has now become the largest mortgage broker in the United States. They basically, use AI to process mortgage applications and approve or deny mortgage applications quite quickly, often within 8 minutes. And so, again, these are two ways that people searching for housing are increasingly subject to different forms of AI screening before then entering a market, or while they're also entering a market in which they might be competing with a large corporation or investment fund operating through an AI, right, as they're making competing for housing, competing to buy a house, right, or they might be buying a house or renting a house from one of these funds. So AI is basically allowing these large corporate actors to operate in new ways, more extensive ways, both as buyers, as sellers, and as landlords, really across the housing market. And as they expand, are able to exercise increasing influence over market dynamics, especially in select neighborhoods in cities. So some brief conclusions here. I'd say that some effects of AI in the housing market may appear quite mundane. I'm thinking here of the Zestimate but their impacts can be quite far-reaching. So I don't think there's been enough said really about the way that the Zestimate and these other kinds of publication of value estimates are reshaping the way that people understand housing markets, right? Including homeowners who can now see a Zestimate updated in real time and see how much their house is hypothetically worth in real time, right? I think that does encourage a certain view of a home as an investment rather than a place to live. But it also sets different kinds of expectations from buyers, sellers, tenants, and landlords that are all set right through this algorithm and through this platform. AI models of value and market dynamics are based on and reinforce existing logics. I could say a lot more about this. I think obviously I've shown up some of these logics towards housing as an asset. Financialization of housing are obviously encoded and reinforced in these systems. I think there's a whole other conversation to be had about how things like racial segregation, social and racial inequalities are encoded into these logics and into these systems, so that past devaluations, historic devaluations of, say, Black and brown neighborhoods in the US are then built into built into these AI systems. Alternatively, some have argued that these systems might present a more objective view of individual property valuations that might make up for past racial inequalities. And that I think also would have negative effects, right? And that suddenly investors or wealthier buyers or undervaluation of Black and brown neighborhoods that will drive gentrification moving forward. So I don't think there's a win-win scenario here. And so I think we need to be very aware of the ways that AI models are driven by existing market dynamics and logics of these markets that are really what need to be addressed. So AI sure can exacerbate some of these things, but the underlying problem might be, a housing market that's driven by financialization and historically structured by relations of inequality and segregation. And finally, I think really important that AI facilitates the growth and expansion of these corporate financial actors in the housing market, allowing them to exercise greater influence over market dynamics. So I think this, again, can't be understated, that the AI does not operate by itself, right? The AI is an extension of these existing actors that are increasingly trying to exercise influence over housing markets. So I think there's a risk here, and this will be my sort of closing statement, I think, is that there's a risk here of sort of putting the blame on AI sometimes, and I have no problem blaming AI, but I do think that often the blame and the sort of enemy of people concerned about housing rights really needs to remain the companies and actors that are driving the housing market, and not necessarily the AI tools that are being used by these companies. Those might exacerbate the problems, but there's a risk of personifying AI as driving some of these problems, and I think that's politically a risk that we would run by sort of losing focus from the real actors and practices that are driving significant problems in access to housing across the world. So with that, we'll close, and please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to discuss any of these things further. Enjoy the rest of your conference.
¿Se escucha? ¿Quesare? ¿Sí? Muchas gracias por la presentación, y sí nos queda mucho para pensar con la intervención de la inteligencia artificial en el mercado inmobiliario. hay algunas cuestiones que todavía no nos estamos planteando cuando estamos en el campo, en la lucha día a día, pero tenemos que tomarnos sin duda alguna un espacio para empezar a reflexionar sobre estas cuestiones. Veo que ha llegado Federico Cuburulo del Departamento de Geografía del Trinity College de Dublín, Irlanda. Y entonces nos gustaría escuchar sus reflexiones como para luego de su intervención quizás tener un intercambio sobre aquellas cuestiones que nos hayan quedado rondando mientras escuchábamos estas presentaciones. ¿Puede ser, Federico?
Hello everyone, can you hear me okay?
Okay.
Perfect. I can share my screen and share my presentation with you if you allow me to do so, please.
Okay, you should be able to share now.
Yes, now I can. Thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. Can you see my screen?
That's great, thank you. Yes.
Shall I begin then?
Please.
Okay. Perfect. Well, thanks a lot for the kind invitation. It's a pleasure to share some thoughts with you today about who is going to inhabit the city of the future in the age of artificial intelligence. This is the big question. We know that AI is already influencing the contemporary city, the way we live, the way we build our cities. And also the previous presentation showed very clearly that AI has a big role in the housing markets. And so my question builds upon the previous presentation, and we're going to try and understand who is going to live in future cities where artificial intelligence are going to be even more popular than today. And we're going to attempt to get a glimpse of the future city by looking empirically at the case of the Line. The Line is a new city currently under development in Saudi Arabia, which is going to be our case study today. The Line is part of a project of regional development called NEOM. NEOM is one of the most expensive urban projects in history. We're talking about over $500 billion. Now, NEOM has been described by the developers as one of the new wonders for the world. A project that will tackle some of the biggest challenges facing humanity and cities, including housing. And so this project is supposed, according to the Saudi developers, to show us a new way of building cities, a new way of living in cities, and in essence, a model for the future of the city. So you can already tell that the NEOM project, which the Line is part of, is very much grounded in a vision of the future. But it is important to remember that in order to understand these futuristic projects, we need to understand what is happening today. So we need to look at the context where these new futuristic project is being developed. And that is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia today in the 21st century. Saudi Arabia is a country that is experiencing a number of challenges. And so today, before looking at the line, we're going to look first at some of the main challenges that Saudi Arabia is dealing with. And we're going to compare the present Saudi Arabia and the future Saudi Arabia as it is imagined through the NEOM project. So the first challenge that Saudi Arabia is experiencing is an economic challenge. So this is a country that has been relying heavily on petroleum, on oil and gas to sustain its economy. But this is a finite resource that is going to last only for another couple of generations. So they're running out of oil. Oil is also causing drops in the economy of the region. It's developing an unstable economy. That's because oil prices have been fluctuating and dropping quite significantly since 2014. So the Saudi economy is unstable. And also, for the purpose of this talk, I wanted to note how, yes, oil can generate a lot of income, but it cannot employ a lot of people. So in Saudi Arabia, the oil industry, which again is the main source of revenue for Saudi Arabia, employs only less than 5% of the Saudi population. So this leads us to the second challenge that we need to remember when we evaluate NEOM, and that is that the rate of jobless citizens in Saudi Arabia is significant. So in 2022, over 10% of the local population was unemployed. And this is a big problem in Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia has a growing young population. And we know that within the next 7 years or so, almost 5 million of young Saudis are expected to enter the job market. So the question is, who is going to employ them? Are these people going to have a job so that they will be able to, live a decent life in Saudi Arabia? So this question of living is, of course, connected to the question of housing. And the question of housing is a big one in Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia has low rates of home ownership. So not many people are able of economically affording a decent accommodation in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So there is a lack of adequate affordable housing, particularly for middle-income workers and low-income workers. So essentially, Saudi Arabia is an uneven country. We have a lot of rich people who can afford premium accommodations, but we also have a lot of low-income, poor people who are just unable to afford adequate housing. So this is the context that we need to remember now that NEOM is being developed. And so the NEOM project, which again is a regional project comprising a few initiatives, includes the line. So the line is the new city that you're looking at right now. It's a linear city built in the Tabuk region, that would be in the northwest of the Arabian Peninsula. It's significantly long, over 170 kilometers, 500 meters tall, and 200 meters wide. So they're building this city as we speak. And I was in Saudi Arabia last year when they were beginning to lay down the foundation of this new city. So I'm going to show with you what is going to be the first stage of this project. So it's a complex project. They're going to build it in different stages. And the first one, so the first stage that is going to open by the end of this decade, according to the developers. So they assume that in 7 years, what I'm going to show you next is going to be ready and habitable. And this is it. So it is called the Hidden Marina. So the hidden marina is the first stage of the line project, so the first part of the line that is going to be built. So I want to give you a feeling of what they're building, what kind of spaces they are building as part of this new city. So this is a rendering illustrating how you're going to develop this part of the city, which again, they are building it as we speak. So right now in Saudi Arabia, they are building exactly this part of the line that you're looking just right now. So in terms of the composition of this part of the line called the hidden marina, we're talking about 70% hospitality, 30% housing. So essentially, it's going to be a lot of hotels and in small percentage accommodations, housing, mostly, you know, very, very, very expensive flats and villas. So here's another image showing, you know, the kind of urban spaces that they have in mind. Essentially, the hidden marina is going to be a yacht club resort for millionaires spending a few days in Saudi Arabia, parking their yacht, and then either renting an accommodation in a very expensive hotel, or they may be able to own a premium accommodation in this part of the line. So essentially, you can already understand who is going to be the citizen here, who is going to inhabit these spaces. We're talking about spaces for the ultra-rich, for economic elites. But also what is interesting and problematic about the line is that they have in mind a population of robots, which is very much in line with the theme of this conference. So the developers are envisioning a city that is going to be populated by humans, and we've already seen the kind of humans who are going to inhabit this space, so, you know, very, very rich people, and robots, so robot citizens. And here it's important to notice that it is not just a futuristic vision. They are actually building this vision. They are actually changing the constitution of Saudi Arabia to allow for the development of this new robotic citizenship. And so, for example, in 2017, so already 5 years ago, a robot created by Hanson Robotics, a robot called Sophia, officially became a Saudi citizen. So this is the first time in history that a non-human intelligence, a robot, an artificial intelligence, becomes a citizen, an unprecedented event in the very long history of the city. So I'm going to draw some conclusions, pointing to some of the main issues underpinning these projects. It's a big one, so there is a lot to say, and of course we can continue the conversation later. But in essence, what these projects shows us is that we have a vision of the future that is completely disconnected from the needs of the present. We have a future city that does not consider what is happening in present cities, particularly in the context of Saudi Arabia, that, as we've seen, is full of challenges. So what Saudi Arabia needs is essentially housing for low, middle income workers. This is what Saudi Arabia needs. And so they shouldn't be building, you know, premium estates and luxury hotels, but this is what they're doing in the line. So there is that disconnect between the vision of the future city, and the contemporary city. Also, what we know is that Saudi people desperately need jobs to live a decent life in their own country. So they need jobs, they don't need robots. What we know about robots, what we know about humanoid artificial intelligences is that they're not going to create many jobs. They're going to replace humans in the job markets. And so Saudi policymakers should focus their attention on creating jobs for people, not creating new activities for new robotic citizens. And so it's a worrying and problematic future the one that we're going to see in the age of artificial intelligence, a future that is disconnected from contemporary challenges in the present city, including the challenge of housing that, as we've seen today, is not really part of the agenda of the line and Saudi Arabia. I hope that you've enjoyed this presentation. I'll be very happy to share more ideas with you and answer your questions. And of course, you can reach out via email. And right now, thank you for your attention. Look forward to your comments. Thank you.
Cristina, no.
¿Ahora?
Sí,
¿Ahora?
de acuerdo,
¿Sí?
sí. Sí.
Ok. Muchas gracias, Federico. A mí después de esta presentación se me representan las imágenes de las películas futuristas. Y lo peor que me puede pasar es verlas representadas en una realidad futura. Por lo tanto, invito a los y las que quieran hacer alguna pregunta o algún comentario que levanten sus manos para poder dedicarle unos minutos a esta presentación.
Yes, any questions that you might have, I'm happy to try and answer it.
Cesare, no sé si...
Sí.
Sí, te
Sí,
doy
sí.
la palabra.
Gracias Federico. Hemos tenido la oportunidad de hablar en preparación de esta conferencia, que es la primera conferencia internacional donde intentamos de articular los distintos aspectos del impacto de la inteligencia artificial. Y tú estabas viajando a Oriente. Entonces sería bueno, por tu parte, que ha investigado profundamente en el tema, decirnos si esto es solamente un nightmare, es una pesadilla, o si eso hay otros ejemplos. Es decir, ¿es una línea política que va a ser prevalente o es marginal? Esta es una pregunta. Otra pregunta es, ¿cuál es o cuál podría ser la relación entre la ciudad automática, que sería esta, y la ciudad inteligente, que aparentemente es un nivel más bajo, pero a ver si hay relaciones y si están convergiendo en una misma u direcciones parecidas, porque si no, si es solamente una pesadilla, es una pesadilla. Yo presumo que no. Aún más tomando en cuenta cuáles son las finalidades, porque la finalidad es, como ya ha dicho la intervención previa, es optimizar el portafolio, optimizar la inversión. Y relatado, disculpa si son demasiadas, pero tenemos la necesidad de intentar de aclarecer algunos aspectos. El tema de cuál es la relación entre esta ciudad, estas ciudades automáticas y la democracia. Tú has dicho que Sofía es la primera ciudadana robot, porque ha habido un cambio en la Constitución. Esta ciudad está dentro de la Constitución de la Arabia, de la Saudi Arabia, o es gobernada por quién? ¿Cuál es la autoridad que gobierna esta ciudad? Entonces también las demás ciudades automáticas. Muchas cosas.
Yes, yeah, a lot of a lot of questions. My Spanish is not great, but I think I understood what you're asking for, so I'll do my best to answer. So there is indeed a complex connection between artificial intelligence and democracy, between autonomous cities run by AI and their political context. And in the case of the line is very much emblematic. So the line, from a political point of view, sits within the Saudi constitution. It is officially part of Saudi Arabia, and so in theory it should be part of the same process of regulation that governs every Saudi city. Now, in practice, what is happening is that they are making the line at the moment an exception. And so you're probably familiar with the notion of free economic zone or special economic zones. So it would be the idea of having spaces in a particular region. They're very common in the Middle East, where there are special regulations and companies will pay less taxes. Now, the same logic, as far as I can tell, is being applied to culture, to religion, to some extent to politics. And so the line is becoming like a special administrative region where new types of cultures, new ways of living are being legitimized by the Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. And so it's an exception within the bigger states that is Saudi Arabia. It's almost a way for Saudi Arabia to test these new ways of living and see if they can apply elsewhere. And of course, this can happen in Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia is an authoritarian country, as some of the participants are rightly pointing out. So they can create these new spaces and these new types of citizenship in a top-down manner. So essentially, the prince is dictating these new logics and these new initiatives, and it's happening. There is no resistance whatsoever from other political entities, because they are simply not allowed. There is only one main political actor, the prince, and Saudi Arabia, we know, is an autocracy. And so in a way, the line is an exception. But I think it's important to remember that there are also other instances where artificial intelligence is shaping the governance and the society of cities in countries that are very close to us. And I think that the previous presentation about housing markets in the US, a very different context. US is not obviously as authoritarian as Saudi Arabia, but nonetheless, there is a strong prominence of artificial intelligences in urban governance. So we should not believe that, okay, it's happening in Saudi Arabia, it's far away, it's not going to happen in the West or in other countries. This might as well happen in our own country if we're not careful. What I know is that these are experimental cities that can set an example that other cities might want to follow. So we need to be careful, we need to critique these projects, we need to understand what doesn't work, and we need to be ready for similar projects or similar developments coming in our own country, because it might be just a matter of time. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Federico. Yo es como que me estoy quedando como para la reflexión con esas palabras que escuchamos anteriormente, que en realidad no estamos en contra de la inteligencia artificial, sino que debemos reflexionar con quiénes son los que intervienen en la inteligencia artificial. Y me parece que a lo largo de estas ponencias hemos realizado un recorrido que nos permite en esta primera conferencia internacional no solamente reflexionar, sino comenzar a poner atención en estas cuestiones para no vernos involucrados con una marea que nos lleva hacia la intervención de la inteligencia artificial en el mercado inmobiliario y en contra del derecho a la vivienda digna. Quisiera primero preguntar si hay alguna pregunta o comentario más. Y si no, ceder la palabra a Cesare como para algunas conclusiones. ¿Hay alguna pregunta más? ¿Comentario? ¿No? Entonces, Cesare, si quisieras tomar la palabra como para ir dando algunas conclusiones, algunos acuerdos.
Sí. Primero, creo que ha sido histórica esta reunión por la cualidad, el tema, los participantes, los relatores, y nos da la gana de construir. Tenemos algunas bases sólidas que hemos debatido, que nos hemos dado cuenta de cómo estos cosas no son sencillamente para llamar el amiguito o la amiguita, sino son algo de más potente que la bomba atómica. Hacen parte de la cuarta revolución industrial. El capitalismo cognitivo tiene un papel, un rol fundamental también en la confrontación geoestratégica. Todas estas guerras que están haciendo, una de las razones principales es el control que pasa a través de los datos, los datos. Y los datos pasan a través de herramientas, pasan a través también relaciones, mercados y todo lo que ya hemos dicho. En el tema específico de la vivienda, de la tierra, de las ciudades, podemos jugar un papel, seguramente, porque es una fuerza, es una potencia. Ojalá que la inteligencia artificial nos pueda ayudar efectivamente a que la humanidad se libera del trabajo y podemos nos dedicar a otra cosa más interesante. Yo tengo dudas, tenemos dudas, porque ustedes se acuerdan cuando empezaron a hablar de la bomba atómica, de la fuerza del átomo. No, parecía que estaba bien, en realidad luego ha hecho la bomba atómica y luego han hecho también las centrales nucleares con todos los riesgos y concretamente un tipo de desarrollo que no ha ido en la dirección correcta. Bueno, de toda manera, sin alargar demasiado, ampliar demasiado este frente, el tema es que las organizaciones de habitantes en el mundo tienen la necesidad, tienen la oportunidad de debatir, conocer y construir herramientas. Si no, el riesgo concreto es que las luchas contra los desalojos, por el derecho a la ciudad, queda en la nada, porque las decisiones han sido tomadas afuera, también afuera del cuadro institucional, de las leyes que históricamente en nuestros países, en el mundo, se han dado. Lo que decía antes el relator de la ONU es muy claro, es muy claro. Ellos, la ONU, lo que están más adentro de cómo necesitamos el enfoque de derecho humano, ¿no?, en toda la vida de la humanidad, incluso las inversiones, incluso las herramientas, dice, sí, necesita una regulación. Luego lo que vamos a ver es que esta no está siendo hecha. El único tentativo que está siendo hecho de que conocemos es en Europa, la Unión Europea, con una especie de, no es una directiva, sino también una regulación. Está bastante parada. Ahora no tenemos el tiempo, pero entre tanto lo que pasa es que estamos pasando desde Chat GPT a Chat GPT 4, Chat GPT 5. ¿Qué es esta cosa? Son aplicaciones que aparentemente son muy simpáticas, ¿no? Tú pones tus palabras, voy a hacer una investigación sobre tal y tal tema, ya te pone la resolución de tu problema, no necesita, se atrofiza tu cerebro. En realidad lo que está pasando es que estas chats son la manera de chupar los datos aún más para que los proyectos desde Deadline hacia el control del mercado y la financiarización del mercado sean más y más las finalidades de la inteligencia artificial. Ha sido muy clara la intervención de Casey, donde decía cuáles son los goals, la finalidad de la utilización de la inteligencia artificial en el mercado. No hay una sola palabra sobre el tema derecho humano, no. El tema es eh, el portfolio. El portfolio, es decir, las inversiones, optimizar la inversión, hacer que la renta sea pagada, hacer que los dueños no tengan esta preocupación de pedir al inquilino la renta, sino que hay otra entidad que inversiona o no inversiona, desafecta o no afecta proyectos o no proyectos en tal y tal ciudad, barrio, con una lógica que no es la lógica de la relación correcta entre propietario de casa, casero e inquilinos. Es otra lógica. Es la lógica de la inversión, la lógica de la acumulación, la lógica de la reproducción del capital. Es que es la misma lógica que está a la raíz del desarrollo sin límites. Cuidado, el desarrollo sin límites es exactamente lo que ha propuesto, que ha de alguna manera santificado en el año 2016 la misma ONU Habitat, ¿se acuerda? La nueva agenda urbana. La nueva agenda urbana decía, el futuro de la humanidad va a ser urbano. Y para que sea urbano necesita que haya un partenariado entre el sector público y el sector privado. Hoy este partenariado, como decir, no es balanceado, porque sí al final lo que gana, lo que manda, lo que mandan, son que tienen el poder de la inteligencia artificial que va a tener aún más fuerza, no es en la relación correcta entre el sector público y el sector privado. El sector privado y el sector público asume la finalidad. Entonces, ¿cómo podemos hacer? No tenemos solución hoy. ¿Cómo podemos pensar, por ejemplo, de enfrentar? Ya es difícil conocer este proyecto de Line, Neon Project. Estamos hablando de 500 billones de dólares. Una ciudad amplia, 170 kilómetros. Es una pesadilla, pero no es solamente, ya ha dicho el profesor Cugurullo, no es solamente en la Arabia Saudita. Hay otros proyectos y hay otros proyectos que van a utilizar las cosas importantes. La cosa importante no es realizar otras ciudades de 170 kilómetros, no, sino los mismos principios, o sea, principio de la ganancia, de la extracción de datos y el gobierno democrático. La democracia es otra cosa, totalmente distinta. Entonces, ¿cómo hacer frente? No tenemos soluciones en este momento, esto está seguro, pero sí tenemos organizaciones populares, tenemos profesionales, académicos, y ya hoy alguno de estos, gracias por la intervención muy puntual y muy precisa, no eslogan, sino concreta, fundamentada en análisis científica, nos han explicado lo que pasa. Bien, tenemos la disponibilidad del relator de la ONU. Es verdad, la ONU aparentemente no tiene poder. Vemos ahora lo que está pasando en Palestina, la guerra estallada entre Israel, que está destruyendo la ciudad de Gaza. La ONU dice, pero tiene que callarse. Allá ha habido sigue siendo violaciones terribles de los derechos humanos. Ahora, pero, lo que estamos intentando de ver, de construir un grupo de trabajo, que en este momento es un grupo pionero, como se dice, ¿no? Estamos explorando estos territorios. Tenemos un poco de retraso, pero tenemos la gana de que este grupo pueda seguir avanzando, pero para seguir avanzando necesitamos que construimos, primera cosa, el conocimiento. Entonces, por favor, difunden este vídeo, lo estamos ya difundiendo. Tenemos también algún texto, no todos lo podemos difundir porque algún texto están, como decir, embargados, pero seguramente el vídeo puede ser utilizado. Seguramente tenemos, yo pienso también en la disponibilidad del profesor Cugurullo de participar en este grupo de trabajo y pensámoslos cómo podemos construir las próximas etapas. Me suena bien, por ejemplo, el hecho que el año próximo, en febrero, vamos a estar, con suerte, al Foro Social Mundial que va a estar en Katmandú, en Nepal. Esta podría ser una etapa importante, donde hacer un poco el punto de lo que vamos realizando durante los próximos meses. Y luego vamos a discutir, por ejemplo, el tema de sobre que el relator de la ONU ha ofrecido disponibilidad. Hemos propuesto que él sea un poco lo que hace normalmente son informes sobre temáticas. Esta temática de la inteligencia artificial desde un punto de vista articulado, entonces no solamente la discriminación que ya está, o la preocupación sobre el tema de la privacy, sino articulado como hemos visto en esta conferencia de hoy. Entonces, ver cómo podemos proponer y articular la colaboración con el relator sobre un informe. Esto es una cosa importante. Otro aspecto, otro sector otros actores que podrían ser involucrados, opinamos que podrían ser los compañeros, compañeras de las organizaciones con las cuales hemos trabajado el año pasado sobre el tema de los servicios públicos. Ya hemos informado, son sindicatos, son organizaciones populares, ONG, ellos ya tienen esta conciencia del impacto de la inteligencia artificial. La tienen más sobre el tema del riesgo de perder el trabajo, que queman muchos puestos de trabajo a un robot en vez de un trabajo de muchos trabajadores, para decir. Pero opino que podríamos con ellos profundizar un poco la relación y ver otra red con la cual podríamos trabajar y proponer es la red del derecho a la energía. Estuvimos participando hace unos meses también, ha habido nuestra compañera Bartiria, en Marruecos, una reunión mundial. Hemos dicho que vamos a hacer este tipo de actividad, a ver la relación entre, ya hemos visto que está la relación entre derecho a la vivienda, derecho a la ciudad, derecho a la energía, ver cómo también esta red mundial podría aportar al grupo. Hay toda la red, la red de autoridades locales. Ellas están trabajando intentando de modernizar, sin embargo, modernizar la gobernanza de las ciudades. Sin embargo, no es difícil ver cómo haya ¿cómo decir? Un enfoque de derechos humanos y un enfoque de democracia compartido sobre esta temática. Entonces, ver cómo nos relacionamos con ellos es como ver que este tipo de recorrido pueda ser un recorrido fructífero para el desarrollo de lo que a nosotros es más importante, o sea, el tema de los derechos humanos, el derecho a la vivienda y el derecho a la ciudad. Último, pero no último, la plataforma global por el derecho a la ciudad. Ustedes saben que la Alianza Internacional de Habitantes es cofundadora de esta red global. Hoy es el Día Mundial del Derecho a la Ciudad. Creo que hoy ya los hemos invitado y los vamos a invitar mejor a participar en este grupo de trabajo para ver que aportamos junto no solamente una mirada, sino también movilizaciones concretas, porque si no hay riesgo que vamos a tener razón, pero ellos ganan. Los malos ganan porque saben hacer su trabajo. Nosotros tenemos que hacer nuestro trabajo juntos y juntas con, por ejemplo, ya he dicho, la red global, para la plataforma global para el derecho a la ciudad. Creo que ya se acabó mi tiempo. No sé si hay otros que quiere la palabra. Quisiera agradecer otra vez a todos, pero creo que ya está Cristina, que es tu cargo. Gracias, gracias.
No sé si Mike, ¿querés decir algo, Mike?
I just want to say it's been fascinating. Remember, a hammer can be used to build a house or to kill people. It's a tool in the hands of the right people that will benefit us. And part of our job is to make sure that it has been used correctly. I'd like to thank the interpreters. It's been a long meeting. Thanks, Christina. Yeah, let a group photo.
Sí, si pudieran liberar sus cámaras para tomar una foto grupal,
Sí, 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 un momento que intento de...
Mientras tanto, mi sugerencia es que con la síntesis y las conclusiones de esta primera conferencia internacional vaya una nota con el llamado a armar el grupo para darle continuidad a esta temática que hoy hemos comenzado humildemente, pero con gran apoyo. Me parece que es sumamente importante terminar el mes de la jornada Cero Desalojos con un nuevo interrogante y con un desafío por delante que vamos a llevar a cabo, y también me parece que un punto importante es que vayamos viendo cómo hacemos una presentación en el próximo Foro Social Mundial en febrero, con una actividad que le dé continuidad a esta primera conferencia, como pasos a seguir. De modo que saliendo de la inteligencia artificial, y antes de terminar, le otorgamos toda nuestra solidaridad a la Casa Santa Cruz de la ciudad de Buenos Aires, que está defendiéndose de un desalojo tras 13 años de lucha, y a partir de esta conferencia les damos todas nuestra fuerza.
Contra a
Faltan
guerra
algunas
pela paz.
E
Sem o
por la paz,
genocídio em Gaza.
por la paz,
absolutamente,
que es
absolutamente.
el lema de la
Não
campaña
podemos nos
Cero
calar
Desalojo.
mediante essa situação.
Exactamente, es el lema de la
Sí.
campaña Cero Desalojo de la Alianza este año por la paz, exactamente. Por
Tal
favor,
cual.
todos salgan de lo
Con
oscuro.
la
Máximo,
Máximo,
Daniela, Alicia, Silvia,
Daniela,
Abraço a
la
todos.
nueva secretaria nacional de la Unión de Inquilinos.
I'll get
Parabéns aos intérpretes. Foi ótimo
Por
ouvir bem.
favor, dai che facciamo una
and
foto.
amending interpretation.
Facciamo una foto con
Davi,
tutti,
Davi,
preparatevi.
Bye bye.
português muito
Grazie
bom.
anche agli
Davi.
interpreti, grazie.
Grazie, sì, grazie, sì.
muchísimas gracias a los
Thanks, everybody.
intérpretes.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Urra.
See you.
Beijo.
Next time.
Sara.
Ah.
Gracias a todos.
Muchas
y a